Hey everyone, welcome to SLO City Church at home. We're so glad you're joining us today. Before we jump into the service, we want to let you know about a couple of announcements. First, March 5th, 6:30 p.m. at the Laurel Creek parking lot, movie night for you and the whole family. We're really excited about this. As the sun sets, we're going to throw up a movie and just enjoy hanging together in that parking lot. So we hope you can be there with us. Second, mark your calendars. April 4th is Easter Sunday. We are so pumped to be able to celebrate the good, the powerful news that there's hope for everyone. So put that date on the calendar, invite some friends and family, and come celebrate with us at Laurel Creek, April 4th. One of the things we say a lot is that SLO City Church exists because of your generosity. That is so true. If you'd like to give to the mission, to the vision of SLO City Church, you can always do so through our mobile app, SLO City Church mobile app, or through our website, slocity.church/give. We're really excited to continue on week 3 of In My Feelings. We're glad you're here with us. Enjoy the service.
I searched the world, but it couldn't fill me. And man's empty praise and treasures that fade are never enough. Then you came along and put me back together. Every desire is now satisfied here in your love. Oh, there's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing is better than you. And I'm not afraid to show you my weakness, my failures and flaws. Lord, you've seen them all, and you still call me friend. 'Cause the God of the mountain is the God of the valley. There's not a place your mercy and grace won't find me again. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing is better than you. You turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. And you turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. You turn graves into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. You turn graves into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. You're the only one who can. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing is better than there's nothing, nothing is better than you.
Hey everybody, welcome to SLO City Church at Home. My name is Brent, and really excited to be with you today. We have just been in a stretch of life that, though difficult, we have just seen incredible things happen in our city, in our community, in and through SLO City Church. And I love that this is a collection of people that isn't reliant on a building or a specific place, that we can move here and there, be online, at home, in a parking lot, and see hope kind of well up and spread in our community through you, through this love of God and love of people. And just so grateful to be a part of this church. Listen, today we are in week 3 of our In My Feelings series, and we've been talking about the need to find and discover truth in this world of emotion. Have you felt just this world, this pull of welling up in an emotional world? We talked over the past couple weeks how you and I, we are not robots. We are not machines. We are human beings that experience real, raw emotions. You and I feel. And we've talked for the past few weeks about how it's easy to get caught up, swept up in emotion and pulled out to sea, to chase feelings or to stuff emotions down and to ignore them. But we talked about how we want to grow into this place of emotional maturity, emotional health, because emotions are a gift to help guide us to a healthy view of self, healthy relationships with others, and a healthy relationship with God. Emotions are a gift to help guide us into a healthy view of self, healthy relationships with other people, and ultimately a deeper, more healthy connection with God. I love this quote again from Pete Scazzaro, and he writes, "Listening to our emotions ushers us into reality, and reality is where we meet God." So today we want to talk about emotions. We want to talk about a specific emotion that all of us feel, that we all need to listen to, but we don't want to be necessarily led by, because this emotion can easily lead us to places of destruction if we aren't careful. Like somebody who has a loaded gun, this emotion has to be handled with care. It must be placed in the hands of somebody who is able, who knows what they're doing with this emotion. When I was 9 years old, my dad took me hunting. We got up early one morning and got dressed. I put on my big orange vest. It was freezing. We climbed into the truck. We drove to the Save a Step gas station on the corner. I got a chocolate milk and a bacon, egg, and cheese biscuit made by the lady behind the counter. Her name was Wanda. Yes, Wanda. We saw her every single morning. And I climbed back into the truck. We drove out to this field. We packed up all of our things, and we hiked out to a tree stand. We climbed up in this tree, and we just sat. I remember sitting there, seeing our breath, watching the sunrise, hopeful to see a few deer, a big buck, like come out into the field so that I could watch my dad do what he did. And we sat, and we sat, and we sat. Here I was, like I wanted to be one of my dad's guys, one of my dad's friends. I wanted to be like one of his boys, and I wanted to be there in that tree stand, and I was just reveling in this moment, like sitting there watching, just being with my dad. I wanted to be like my dad so much, and here I was hunting with him. As the morning crept by, it was clear that like maybe I had spooked them by all of my noise, and there was nothing to shoot at. So we climbed back down the tree stand, went back to the truck, and as my dad was loading up all of the things, he turned and he looked at me, and that's when it happened. He said, "Hey, Brent, do you want to take this muzzle loader? Do you want to take this and shoot it?" He hands me a loaded gun, a 1984 Thompson Center muzzle loader. He puts it in the hands of a 9-year-old, and he says, "Take it and shoot it." And he turns his back to the truck, and he starts doing what he does. And this was my chance. This was my chance to prove that I was one of the guys. This was my chance to prove that I could handle this extremely heavy gun and shoot it like a man. And so I did it. I picked up this gun, and I lifted it up, and I held it out as far as I could. And boom! I shoot it up into the sky. I don't know if I was shooting at someone or at something, but I shoot this gun, but all I remember is the excruciating pain of feeling like my shoulder had just been torn off of my body. The gun kicks back, hits my shoulder. I fall to the ground. The gun clangs down in the field, and I am just overwhelmed with this excruciating pain from the kickback of this muzzleloader. My dad runs to my side, and he makes sure if I'm okay, and I'm telling myself, don't cry, Brent, don't cry. You're one of the boys. You're one of his friends. You got to man up. You got to be there. And don't cry, but there's tears are welling in my eyes because my shoulder is literally hanging off of my body. So I thought, and he says, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm okay. And he starts hysterically laughing. He is like on the ground, rolling around, laughing at what I had just done. And I'm like crying, I'm laughing, tears are welling up, and I'm trying to laugh and I'm trying to cry. I'm laughing and crying at the same time. And I remember that moment when I stood up, my dad packed up the gun, we got in the truck, and we went to lunch with all of his friends. And at that bar, at some place in Kentucky, I got to sit and listen to that story be told on repeat to all of his friends. My dad checked on me. He made sure I was okay. He took care of me. He got me a pack of ice for my shoulder. And I remember just as my shoulder turned black and blue, sitting at that table, laughing. But inside, I felt something. I experienced something for the first time in my entire life. For the first time in my entire life, I remember feeling this emotion. This emotion started to well up in me. It was this thing called shame. It was this thing called shame. Have you ever experienced shame before? Shame is brutal. Now, shame is defined several ways by several different people. Merriam-Webster and Wikipedia, they all have different definitions. But shame is this unpleasant, self-conscious emotion typically associated with a negative evaluation of the self, withdrawal motivations, and feelings of distress, exposure, mistrust, powerlessness, and worthlessness. Shame is a powerful feeling and a powerful emotion. And see, as a 9-year-old boy, in my mind, I had failed. I had an opportunity to prove myself, to live up to my own expectation and to surpass my dad's expectations. And I picked up this gun and clearly didn't know how to handle it. And it kicked back, destroyed my shoulder. And I had made a mistake. I did something that was embarrassing. People were laughing. But what I experienced in the wake of this failure is that I began to take that failure and turn it in on myself. I began to take the picture of me lying on the ground with a wounded shoulder, somebody who didn't know what they were. I began to take that mistake and to turn it in on myself. And I started to feel this powerful emotion called shame that said to me, I am a failure. Not I made a mistake, but I am a mistake. I am not enough. See, shame is powerful, and it's unpleasant for sure. And here's the thing about shame. It's different than guilt. Where guilt says, I did something wrong, shame says, I am something wrong. Where guilt says, I made a mistake, shame says, I am a mistake. Where something that was done to me was wrong, shame says, you're the reason the wrong thing happened to you. See, shame and guilt are different. Guilt is I did something wrong. Shame says I am. At my core, my identity, I am something wrong. Have you ever experienced shame when you did something or something was done to you. See, shame is constantly lurking, and we don't like talking about it openly. I wanted the love series. I wanted to be like Mike last week and just talk about love and have everybody be really, feel really, really good. But we're talking about shame today, and I don't like talking about it because I don't like facing it, but it is present. One of the 5 core emotions that you and I experience. Shame plays a powerful role in how we handle it. How we handle it matters. What role has shame played in your life? I asked some of my friends recently this question: what role shame has played in their life? And I just want to read a couple of these to you. One of my friends said, I was constantly consumed with thoughts of I'm not enough. That belief sent me on a path of seeking approval of others in my early years, and this led me to flawed thinking, shady choices, and more shame on shame on shame. Another friend says, I've always been hard on myself, whether it was bad grades or bad relationships, and never feeling worth anything, especially after the abortion. I struggled to know how to be forgiven, to forgive myself, and I feel stuck living in this pit of shame and guilt. I feel alone with no way out. Another friend said, I feel shame because I know I was a bad mom and my daughter is struggling because of the decisions I made early in her life. How can I move on from this? Another friend, shame had me believing that it was my fault that I was molested at church by a very well-loved high school boy. That it was somehow my fault and my shame to bear that this wrong happened to me. She writes, I know it wasn't, but that's what I felt and what the church I was a part of had me believing for years. Can I say quickly, if something has ever happened to you, if you have ever encountered some level of abuse, and followers of Jesus, a church, stood by and made you feel the shame of a decision that happened to you, that a sin put on you, can I just say, I'm sorry? That is not the way of Jesus. But you and I, we experience this powerful emotion of shame. Another friend said, shame always has me anxious about doing the right thing, afraid of the shame that follows doing something wrong. Shame tells me that no matter how successful I am, how much money I have, I'm still not worth a penny. Shame has played so many roles in my life: a sense of worthlessness, a sense of loneliness, inadequacy, hopelessness to change, suicidal thoughts, lack of self-care, and just an overall inability to receive love. See, this is what shame does in us. Shame makes us direct our focus in and view our entire self in a negative light. See, in shame, we can be led to a place of disconnection. We're just disconnected from ourselves, from other people. We find ourselves disoriented, and we find ourselves just pulled apart and dismantled. And the thing about shame is it doesn't just do that in us. That shame has powerful ramifications for in us as we view ourselves in a negative view of ourselves. But shame also has ramifications to those around us. Shame also often does something to others. I was reading an article this past week in Psychology Today, and that shared that when we are overwhelmed with shame personally, we can often attack others out of those feelings of shame. We can attack other people, and attacking other people, it says, often serves to disown what the shameful person feels. In order to escape shame's self-diminishing effects, expressing contempt toward another person or shaming them relocates one's own shame in the other person. And relocating one's own shame in another person is a typical self-protective maneuver of the person who feels the shame. In layman's terms, for guys like me, to explain, people who struggle with shame, who are overwhelmed with shame internally, for themselves, toward themselves, shame-filled people often shame other people. Shame-filled people can often and easily shame other people to take the view off of themselves. See, shame can be this like contagious disease. I feel shame, so I'm going to shame you, and 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 I'm afraid, so I'm going to shame you, and I'm going to put this heap of, I want you to be in a negative view of yourself because I don't like myself either. And so if we can just not like each other, the playing field can be level. And when we find that shame just grows on shame on shame on shame. Brene Brown is a shame researcher who talks often about the prevalence of this powerful emotion that you and I both feel. And she writes, shame needs 3 things to grow exponentially: secrecy, silence, and judgment. See, shame needs 3 things to grow: secrecy, silence, and judgment. So we don't talk about our shame. We don't talk about that thing that was done to us that made us feel 2 feet tall. We don't talk about that thing that we did that now that's all we see when we interact with other people, or we maybe have an opportunity to grow. All we see, we just are secret with our shame. We're silent about some of the abuses that we've walked through, some of the things that we battle. And so we slide into this pattern of judging ourselves, criticizing ourselves, and then judging and criticizing others. Shame put on others also tells everybody else, hey, you be quiet about this. I don't want you to tell anybody what just happened. Be silent. Don't tell anybody. I don't want the community to know. You need to be, I'm going to shame you so that you are silent, so that it is secret, and I'm just going to criticize you to keep you in the pit of shame. And shame just grows. We live, guys, in a culture of shame. People are afraid to be themselves. I asked that question on Facebook, and I got personal direct messages. People didn't feel comfortable writing them for the Facebook world to see. And that's different than previous experiences, because people don't like to talk about their shame. I don't like to talk about my shame, and it just grows, and it grows, and it grows. And it damages the way you view yourself, the way you view others, the way you view God. Carl Jung has a powerful line about shame. He says, shame is a soul-eating emotion. Man, that's true. Shame is a soul-eating emotion. So the question is, what do we do when we wrestle with shame? What do we do when we come face to face with the shame that lurks up and creeps in, that seeks to take control and lead us and grow around us? What do we do? Today, my prayer is that as we look at Jesus, you will see that though shame is a soul-eating emotion, the empathy and grace of Jesus is soul-freeing. That as we look at Jesus, the empathy and grace and power that we see in Jesus would free our souls from the weight and damage that shame has inflicted upon us. So we're going to look at Jesus today and how he interacts with people. Now, here's the deal about Jesus. Jesus was notorious for drawing a crowd. As he walked through first century Galilee and Jerusalem and Judea, people would come from everywhere to hear him teach. But he never, ever got swept up by the crowd, wooed by the crowd, wooed by the celebrity status that people wanted to give him. He took time for every individual, and he walked everywhere. And as he walked, he met people who were climbing up in trees and people who were thrown out in front of him. And he locked eyes with real people in real circumstances, in real pain and in real shame. And Jesus interacted with people that no one else wanted to interact with outcasts, with those who had been shamed and disgraced and others were ashamed of. Jesus was not ashamed of them. He stepped down into the dirt and he locked eyes with them. And in Mark 5, we see another individual who had been put out, who had been shamed, who had been chained up, who had been living by himself, that Jesus, as he's traveling, takes time to interact with. Now, in Mark 5, we are introduced to this man whose life hadn't worked out the way he had wanted to. We don't know this man's name. The Bible, like literally Luke and Mark both just call him this man who lived in the tombs. He's maybe more known as the Gerasene demoniac, but we see that people knew about him. This monster of a man, they could hear him screaming day and night. This man lived among the tombs. People wouldn't travel on the road by where this man was because they were afraid of him. He was different, he was loud, and he was living alone in the tombs, in this graveyard by himself. I want you to think for a second. What brings a person to live among the dead? What brings a person to live in a graveyard? What brings a person to live there? It's shame. It's shame. Maybe it was decisions that he once made. Maybe it was abuses that had been committed against him. Maybe it was his failure or mistakes or criticism from others or guilt that just grew legs and morphed into this mountain of guilt and mountain of shame that told him, you are worthless, you are unlovable, you are inhuman, and shame had just attacked and eaten this man's soul. And it had taken him to a place where he now lives in isolation, in the tombs, in secret, overwhelmed and overcome by the accusations that swirled in his minds. And these demons from his past were pushing him to this constant judgment of himself, this constant place of self-hatred. And he was disconnected, he was disoriented, he was dismantled. And day and night, he would just wail, cry out under the weight of shame. Mark tells us that he would cut himself with stones. He was living in complete and utter darkness, complete and utter shame. But one day, one particular day, after a crazy storm had swept through the night before, he noticed something different. There were boats approaching the shoreline. Now, nobody came to his shore because he was crazy. He was out of his mind. People were intimidated, scared of him. But he sees these boats approaching the shore, and he watches a group of people started to unload all their things. And he's nervous because he's not had a good experience with people. People can't be trusted. But there's one man who catches his attention. He felt this pull in his soul. Something said to him, run away, get away as fast as you can. And there was another, something stronger thing that said, that man is safe. He is safe. And that pull drew him in. See, for so long, he lived in so much pain and secrecy and in judgment. And he had this thought, he is safe. Before he knew it, he was running down this hill from the tombs to the shore, and he falls at this man's feet. And that man's name was Jesus. Let's read the passage together. Mark 5. Verse 1 says this. This is Jesus and his disciples. It says, they went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes. When Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an impure spirit came from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain. For he had often been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart and broke the irons with his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs in the hills, he would cry out. He would cut himself with stones. But when he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of Jesus. He shouted at the top of his voice, what do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In God's name, do not torture me. For Jesus had said to him, come out of this man, you impure spirit. Then Jesus asked him, what is your name? My name is Legion, he replied, for we are many. See, this man, full of unclean spirits, overwhelmed with shame and impurities and all of these experiences in his life, overwhelmed with the voices that told him he was worthless, so live among the dead. He comes and he runs to Jesus' feet, and notice the first thing he says, Jesus, Son of the Most High God. Jesus, Son of the Most High God. Listen, he says, do not torture me. Why would he ask Jesus not to torture him? Maybe because he had been tortured by others. Maybe because he had been neglected or betrayed or beaten by other people, abused and shamed by others. Maybe because he lived in this torture chamber where he just tortured himself with the things that he said about himself. He was cutting himself. Maybe he expected the same from God. I know many of you have been wounded by other people, and it has wounded your view of God to where you think God is maybe a torturer like so-and-so. That's not what we see here in Jesus. Jesus responds, and he doesn't condemn the man. Notice, Jesus responds and he doesn't condemn the man, but he speaks to the spirit. He speaks to the shame. Jesus calls him a man and not a monster. He doesn't say, look at you. I cannot believe where your life has gotten you. Look at the shame, look at where shame has gotten you. You deserve this. You're disgusting. You're worthless. How could you get to this point? Jesus doesn't do that. Jesus doesn't live in the world of shame. He lives in the world of grace. See, Jesus speaks to the lies that have overwhelmed him, to the voices that consumed him, to the spirits that had him captive. And he says, come out, leave this man. Shame be gone. I want to take away all of this shame. And then look, Jesus says, what is your name? What is your shame? He speaks to the actual unclean spirits and he says, what is your name? I want to know the afflictions that are happening in your life that are keeping you captive. What are the things that you are buried under, that you've kept secret, that you've kept silent about? Those judgments of yourself, those judgments or criticisms or sins committed to you that have kept you captive. What is your name? And the man responds, we are many. We are many. We are many. What about you? What is your shame? What if you were to name your shame? Would you say, we are many? My shame is much. My shame is great. We are many. Will you name it? Will you name it? I want you to see something here, and I want to make a few points, and then we're going to wrap up together. Jesus encounters this demon-possessed man whose shame had driven him into isolation. There's something about Jesus that is approachable, and so this man runs down the hills, falls at Jesus' feet, and Jesus locks eyes with him. He wants to lock eyes with you too. And I just want to make some observations. Number one, Jesus meets us in our shame. Jesus meets us in our shame because Jesus is safe. He is safe. Jesus is a safe place to bring the things done to us, the things that we've done, the voices that tell us that who we are, the voices that tell us that we've gone too far, or we're too far gone, or we're too lost, or we're too broken, or we're too wounded, or we're too jacked up to find hope. Jesus is safe. He will not torture you when you bring your pain, your shame, your guilt to his feet. He locks eyes with us. He is approachable and willing to see you. Hear that. He sees you. He sees you. He knows what's been done, and he sees you. And he says, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Learn from me. I am gentle and humble in heart. You will find rest for your souls. Jesus met this man in his shame, and he can meet us in our shame. Jesus is a safe place to run. And number two, we see that Jesus is powerful to save. I want you to hear that again. Jesus is powerful to save. Do you remember that old worship song from back in the day, Mighty to Save? My Savior, he can move the mountains. He is mighty to save. He is mighty to save forever. Author of salvation. He is powerful to save. We see that he meets this man in his shame, and he speaks to the spirits and he says, shame be gone. And in verse 15, we see that villagers hear all of this ruckus and come out. And when they came to see Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons sitting there, dressed, fully clothed, and in his right mind. And they were terrified. Notice this. Jesus is a safe place to run and powerful to save, and the people of the village are afraid. Why? Because Jesus did something crazy. Jesus did something powerful. They were afraid of his power because they knew that this man lived naked, cutting himself, screaming. They tried to chain him up and he would break they're terrified because they see that Jesus has power over your shame and my shame, and he can lead us to a place of safety and health and healing. Do you know the power that Jesus has to meet you right where you are? Do you know the power that he has to save you, to heal you, to rescue you, to restore you, to redeem you, to meet you right in the middle, just like he did 2,000 years ago and outside of a tomb in the land of the Gerasenes? He can meet you there too. Jesus says, I can put you back together by my power, by my love, by the way I lock eyes with you, I empathize with you, by the way that I can rescue you through this amazing grace. See, Jesus meets us, he heals us, he is powerful to save, and then as we read on, we see Jesus send this man with hope in his hands. Jesus restores him, he saves him, he heals him, and then he sends him with hope. Jesus sends us with hope. Back to the story, Mark chapter 5, verse 18, it says this: as Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with Jesus. But Jesus did not let him. Jesus said, go home to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you. I love this. Finally, maybe for the first time in this man's life, he has met someone who sees him and cares about him and not all of his behavior and not all of the bad things that he's encountered, not all of his shame. He finally meets someone who is safe. And this man has freed him, and he wants to just stay with Jesus. He wants to get in the boat with Jesus and just be close to Jesus because Jesus is a safe place to run. But Jesus turns to him and he says, go. Listen, I've healed you. I've put you back together. And Jesus says, it's not good for you to come with me. I want you to go home. I want you to go home and tell all of your former friends and your family and your enemies all that God has done for you. Tell the story of the chain breaker, the shame breaker, the healer. Tell the story of how God's done an amazing work in your life. All those people who are amazed that you are clothed and in your right mind, I want you to go home and I want you to just share your story of shame being gone. Verse 20 says, so the man listened to Jesus. He went away and he began to tell in the Decapolis, this 10 cities area, not just his town, but all of these cities, how much Jesus had done for him. And all the people were amazed. See, Jesus meets us in our shame. Jesus is powerful to save. And then Jesus puts us back together and sends us with hope to share. See, he is not ashamed of your shame. He is not torturing you in your shame. He wants to meet you in the middle of it. And I know our shame is great and it's secret and it's silent and it's constantly judging us. But would you see Jesus meeting you in this place where he extends a hand and he says, son, daughter, I see what's been done. I know the voices. I see the impure spirits at work in your life, and I want to break those chains. I want to break that cycle, that pattern of shame. To end this cycle of shame, growing shame, and shame on shame on shame, we have to come face to face with Jesus, bringing our shame to the table, calling it out by name. And we find hope and healing in the amazing grace-filled eyes, grace-filled hands of Jesus that are willing to put us back together, to stand us up, and to send us out to tell the story. I got a text from my uncle recently. This dude is and was wildly successful as an anesthesiologist. He played rugby at a D1 school in college, like super sharp guy, like wildly successful family. But he shared how he spent most of his life looking the part on the outside, looking perfect on the outside, but on the inside was just stuck in that cycle of shame. He told me bluntly, Brent, Jesus broke the cycle of shame in my life, period. I had a few friends who saw me, not what I had done, not what I had gotten caught up in, but they saw me. They loved me, they invested in me, they believed in me, and they walked me to the feet of Jesus. And I see now that I'm not worthless. I see now that I am seen and loved by Jesus. I see now that his love and his approval from me is enough and is unconditional. And Jesus has freed me from this performance-based life, from performance-based relationships, from performance-based religion. And the shame I walked with every day is gone as I see the gospel of grace. It's been life-changing. Listen, I don't know where this sermon hits you, but I pray that today could be your life change moment where you find yourself pulled to the safety of Jesus, pulled to the power of Jesus. You find yourself running to the feet of Jesus and you name that shame and you bring it to him and say, Jesus, can you heal me of this? Can you help me to find healing? It might not be a light bulb moment, a light switch moment, but it might be a journey that you start to walk on to find healing for your soul. Hebrews 12, verse 2 says, fixing our eyes on Jesus, he is the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross. He took on its shame, and then he sat down in victory at the right hand of the throne of God. As we fix our eyes on Jesus, we see that he takes on our shame. We do not have to live in secrecy, silence, and judgment. We can stand before our ultimate judge and find healing for our souls. Would you take that step, that next step that you know you need to take this week? Let's pray together. God, we love you. We thank you for seeing us right where we are. We thank you for not being ashamed of us. We thank you for being a God of grace and of power and of mercy and of truth that can break any chain. We thank you for being a God who says, shame be gone. And you walk with us and you invite us to trust you. We love you. It's in Jesus' name. Amen.